Hello and welcome back to this Downful Idealistic Crusade. This video will be going over my latest acquisitions from Kino Lorber and their most recent site sale. This video is a little bit delayed because unfortunately, as is becoming more and more common with a lot of labels, there are a number of issues popping up in the manufacturing process, and that's due to the fact that a lot of plants have closed and there's quite a giant backlog of titles, much like what we're seeing in vinyl replication plants for vinyl records because of the demand and there being less plants open. So I just had some issues with some of my recent Criterion pickups from the Barnes & Noble sale, and unfortunately, even though Kino's distribution is handled by Technicolor, I got 2 discs in this order that had severe damage and issues, and what seemingly some moisture damage as well. So I had to wait to get replacements, and thankfully I was able to do that. So I just waited to put this video together until I got those in. So that's why this is a little bit delayed, but it is something that is becoming much more common between all labels because, again, the actual manufacturing processes have become a bit more stressed in terms of the fact that several plants have closed. Most things have moved to the disc replication plants in Mexico, and there's a lot of demand and very little in terms of the distribution and manufacturing output. It itself is becoming more limited. So to start with, I want to talk about 2 of the new releases with slipcovers and 4K releases. Kino is doing more and more 4K titles, and it's helpful when you're also trying to future-proof yourself to go ahead and get 4K releases on sale when they include the Blu-ray disc. However, Kino doesn't always do this because some titles they don't get the Blu-ray license for, so it's UHD only, and then in this case, they actually wound up doing completely separate releases, so unfortunately, you have to pick one or the other, and if you're not fully UHD ready, which I hope to be by the end of this year, and I will be revisiting this title on their UHD release, I decided to go ahead and get their standard Blu-ray version because it was on sale. I really want to look at the new work. It's easier to view a Blu-ray on the go, and it was very cheap, and it has custom original poster art on the slipcover, and I'm a sucker for these kinds of things, so I went ahead and got the standard Blu-ray version of their Touch of Evil release. This includes all 3 of the available versions of the film, the Universal theatrical cut that was taken away from Wells, recut by the studio, and buried on the bottom half of a not very good double bill. So that's why the film was just not looked at and almost immediately forgotten, even though it is one of the greatest films ever made. So it was great news that the film is getting a deluxe reissue and a new 4K release. It also includes the I guess it was discovered sometime in the 70s or 80s because it was accidentally loaned out to a film school for a screening of the film of the what is termed the preview version, and it is essentially a version that does not have all of the cuts and changes of the theatrical cut, but is still a sort of compromised version. It does kind of work better in some ways, but it's amazing that it exists, and it was released on home video and sort of became the default version of the film for a while. That had a few things were a little bit better because it wasn't entirely the studio edit, but it still had a lot of the studio edit problems. Then this finally includes the 1998 reconstruction produced by Rick Schmidlin and edited by the great Walter Murch that finally gives us a version of the film that at least comes closer to what we can assume the Orson Welles original cut of the film as it was intended would have been like. And they used the famous 60-page memo that Welles wrote Universal begging them to at least follow up some of his directives, and the whole process of the film being dismantled was really, it seems like a vindictive thing because it's not like the film was over budget or they didn't know what Welles was doing or they didn't like the amazing footage he had been turning in. It was just they didn't like the final result and they took it away from him, and this was of course the last film he would make in Hollywood. So if you're coming to this film for the first time, the reconstruction is the way to go. I find it tough watching either the theatrical or preview versions now because the reconstruction does address so many of the problems, but it doesn't claim to be the end-all be-all. It is merely the best approximation that anybody could make. And for my money, it is one of the absolute finest and most important reconstruction attempts of a film, and really is how you can see the fuller greatness that is on display. And again, one of the greatest the artworks of the entire medium, one of the greatest films ever made. So that is why I am so excited to dig into this, because it does have brand new extras plus a new Tim Lucas commentary, while it does also port over the rather nice extras and commentaries from the original Universal DVD and Blu-ray releases. Again, this does have a custom slipcover that is exclusive to this version with the beautiful original poster art. So if you're a slipcover fanatic, you'll have to buy both versions. And you'll have to buy both versions if you want a Blu-ray version of the 3 cuts on the Kino release and you want the UHD package. And it's interesting to compare them because they're obviously not identical. They have different poster art on the slipcovers, and the cases are a little bit different, which is rather important. It has the typical Kino style, but they actually describe each of the cuts, which is really helpful because most video releases that have all 3 versions don't actually give you a description on the box, and people are sort of scratching their heads if they're new to the film. We do have the old Universal extras plus the new Kino materials that are really important. Then we get to the Blu-ray case itself, but unlike the UHD that a lot of people have bemoaned has a stacking disc case hub system, so you have the UHDs stacked on top of each other, which is unfortunate because that leads to disc scratching, and UHDs are they have a lot more issues if there's any sort of scratches on them than a Blu-ray does. But I was very pleasantly surprised when you open the Blu-ray. It is a nice standard hinged case, and it is also 3 discs because Kino has encoded each of the versions on its own separate disc, and that's really the reason why this is a more expensive release for either version and why they separated it into 2 different releases. Otherwise, it would have to have been a 6-disc release to have all 3 Blu-rays and all 3 UHDs. Now, I don't really think it was necessary to have 3 discs because the theatrical and preview versions could have been seamlessly branched as they were on the Universal release, so probably could have gotten it down to 2 discs, but I don't necessarily mind having 3 discs because, as long as you can keep the bit rate up high and preserve the quality of the master, that's perfectly fine. But I did think it was a bit strange that they went for 3 separate discs when they could have branched the 2 studio versions and made it a 2-disc release like the old Universal versions. Again, this is a 4K master. It does advance upon what is on the Universal release, but I'm curious to check out the audio because the audio on the old Universal Blu-ray and DVD was rather heavily noise managed and didn't sound all that great. So I'm thinking probably that's going to have carried over to this, and I need to do some digging to try and find a better sounding version of all the older releases. But still, this is a big leap forward, and I'm very excited to listen to the Tim Lucas commentary because those are always a treat, and he does incredible, copious amounts of research. So I know that's going to be fantastic. Next, I had to grab this because I was afraid the slipcover was going to sell out, and their 4K discs, when they're on the site sales, are very cheap. So this, of course, is another of the greatest films ever made. Kino's release of The Apartment, the Billy Wilder masterwork on Blu-ray and 4K UHD from a new 4K master. This has this beautiful original artwork. Their slipcovers are always really well done, so even if you're like me and you're not too big on them, it is nice to get the slipcover while you still can, because once they sell out of the first pressings, they do discontinue the slipcovers. This has the typical Kino style. The real draw of this release is the new master, which is an improvement over the beautiful deluxe Arrow Blu-ray package. But unfortunately, this being Kino, it does not carry over all those Arrow extras, and that it was quite substantial and had the lovely limited edition box packaging. So you'll have to get the Arrow or hang on to it for those extras. But the new master here is a 4K master, and you can get it on the UHD in true 4K. So it is an improvement in picture. Unfortunately, the film's audio has been subjected to all kinds of noise reduction over the years, and most versions sound really crummy, and that's all due to MGM's tomfoolery. For me, the best release that I know of audio-wise is the old Letterbox Laserdisc. It is an older MGM Letterbox transfer, but the audio has not been manipulated or messed with. And as far as I'm aware, that is the best sounding version of all the different ones I've tried. And it's quite a substantial difference because the MGM DVDs and Blu-rays and then the audio turned up again on the Arrow Blu-ray, they were all quite poor. The first MGM DVD is really terrible. That's the worst sounding one. So I am curious to check out the audio on here. I have heard that it's supposed to sound like the Laserdisc, but there might also be some noise management going on, unfortunately. It would be a nice surprise if it's any better than the MGM audio or what was on the Arrow disc, but it's always rare if something's going to be as good as the best older version of an audio track. So that's the real drawback of this otherwise wonderful new 4K presentation. However, it does have the essential new extra of Joseph McBride doing a commentary. McBride is one of the great film historians and one of the greatest biographers, and his commentaries are always a treasure. And it's especially great because he just finally published his great Billy Wilder tome, which I reviewed on this channel, called Dancing on the Edge. And he's been doing a number of commentaries for the more recent Kino Lorber Billy Wilder releases. So that is the main draw in terms of the extras. That's the big new feature. And McBride's commentaries are like a lecture or a symposium. They are so jam-packed with information, but they're also conversational in order to be an entertaining and informative commentary. So if you see he's done a commentary for something, it's worth the purchase price of the disc alone. But so is the picture improvement, even though this is just a standard case and doesn't have the amazing limited box packaging of the Arrow Blu-ray. So you basically get this for the new commentary and the new master, and getting it in UHD as well, but you will have to hang on to the Arrow release for its copious extras and wonderful packaging. And for the best audio, you need the old MGM Letterbox Laserdisc, because that's just how these things work. Next are the two titles that I had to get replacements of, and these I could tell when I opened the box and I saw the completely screwed up covers that were wrinkled and scrunched in there like they had gotten soaking wet. And then some of the discs had just gunk all over the surfaces. And then they also had broken case hubs, so they were floaters as well and had scratches all over them. It was just, I'd never gotten anything like that from Kino before, and they were so obviously damaged. You would think that somebody in the warehouse would have noticed when they were putting in the box, but I guess they didn't. But I will say I was very, very pleased with Kino's customer service response. They got back to me almost immediately. I mean, that just like within an hour, and it was a very easy process. I described what had happened, and they just asked for a photo, which I just emailed them a photo of the two damaged titles, and they immediately gave me a label, had me ship them back, and it was prepaid, which was cool. And then as soon as I dropped them off, they had replacements out to me. So it was no frills, extremely easy, and a very positive experience. So honestly, it's just about the fastest turnaround I've ever had with a label in terms of having to get something replaced that was damaged. So that was really, really wonderful, and I didn't expect it to be that quick. So these two, and that's why I've got some photos up so you can see what I was talking about in terms of they were damaged. I picked up one of Kino's Italian Western releases, and this is one of those where, because there's so many releases of these films, I do try and figure out which version is the best in terms of extras and encode and what cut of the film it has and stuff. Sometimes it's the Kino release, sometimes it's a German release or a Eureka release. It just depends. This one is one of Sergio Corbucci's lesser regarded films, but after reading Joseph Cotton's autobiography, I was fascinated to finally go and see this because Joe Cotton in an Italian Western directed by Corbucci. I mean, that makes the Hellbenders a must. This has lovely original artwork, and it's credited as being from a brand new 4K scan. So anytime you can get a Kino release with a new scan, that's something. I've wanted to see this for a while, and it just seemed really appealing to see Joseph Cotton in an Italian Western and a Corbucci Western nonetheless. It does have an Alex Cox commentary. He does commentaries for most of the Kino Western releases, and if you've listened to any of those and you know his speaking style, you'll know kind of what you're in for, and they're always fun listens. It also includes the trailer, but I do really love the original poster art here. As far as I'm aware, this is the best release of this film, and I don't think this master has been released elsewhere, but I could be wrong. And it's not all Italian Westerns that have gotten 4K masters, so that was a nice thing to see. The other one is a rather nice sort of deluxe release because it's got reversible art of the 1965 John Sturges film, The Satan Bug, which is one of the really only biological warfare films to come out at this time period. I think Sturges is very underrated, and this has just been on my watch list for so terribly long. It was very cheap in Kino's sale and is in their going out of print section now, so I figured I'd better grab it before it was gone. Thankfully, I was able to get this replacement because it has beautiful original art and a reversible sleeve, so it was really terrible that this was the one that had the really damaged art. It does have a new commentary by the great Glenn Erickson, otherwise known as Cine Savant or DVD Savant. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to his commentary track. I've loved the other ones of his that I've heard. And of course, I've read his work for years and years. And then on the inside, it's one of the rare Kino releases that has really cool reversible art. So again, I was very happy to get this replaced because it sucked that this one had the worst cover art damage of the two that I had that were messed up. Now to run through the rest, I picked up two of Kino's releases of other Robert Aldrich films, who again is somebody I think is extremely underrated. And after I watched Veracruz again and Olzana's Raid, I started thinking about the other Aldrich films, and I really wanted to look at this one, which was Kino's release of Apache, the first film Aldrich and Burt Lancaster made together and what made Veracruz possible. This is a really striking Western that is actually painting Native Americans in a positive light and trying to depict the ongoing struggles and that just never went away. It sort of is the much earlier setup for eventually the film Olzana's Raid, where you get the sort of final and most unflinchingly realistic portrait of the conflict between U.S. forces and settlers and the Native Americans. Again, also directed by Aldrich and starring Burt Lancaster. So Lancaster is a force of nature in this, as he is in practically everything, and I've really wanted to look at this and see it in this new HD master. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any extras outside of the trailer, but I've just been really looking forward to this. Wanted to get it as soon as it came out. It's just been on my wish list, and I've been wanting to revisit this terribly ever since rewatching Veracruz and Olzana's Raid. I also grabbed their release of Aldrich's Attack from 1956 with this stunning artwork. Again, this tells you what kind of film you're in for when it's a blood-red portrait of Jack Palance and pulling a grenade pin with his teeth. That tells you what kind of film this is. This is somewhat in a similar vein, I should say, to the great underrated Aldrich-directed 10 Seconds to Hell, which also stars Jack Palance with the great Jeff Chandler. Here he's matched with Lee Marvin and a whole other host of great faces you will recognize. This is a very blistering World War II film, but it's one I haven't seen in a long time, so very much looking forward to looking at it in HD. It does include the trailer, but unfortunately, that's it in terms of the extras. And it's just great to have another Aldrich film in HD on Blu-ray from Kino, because it's not like his career is trumpeted as much as it should be. And a lot of these titles are much more obscure, particularly films like this or 10 Seconds to Hell, which just don't have the name recognition. And that film is now out of print from Kino, and I'm sure this one will eventually do the same, unfortunately, because it's an MGM title. Now moving on to titles, just going chronologically, this one is a real gem that never gets discussed. I have the DVD that Fox did in their beautiful Horror Classics Volume 2 set, so this is really just an HD upgrade, and I'm just amazed it has a Blu-ray release. That is 1932's Chandu the Magician, starring Bela Lugosi in one of his great villainous turns. This is a beautiful adventure film based on a serial character, and actually there would be a serial later on where Lugosi actually plays the hero. So in this he plays the villain, and then later in the serial version where they do another Chandu story, but as a cliffhanger serial, Lugosi is actually playing the heroic character, which is a wonderful turnaround. But this film was directed by William Cameron Menzies, the great visionary production designer, and it was shot by the legendary James Wong Howe. It's a really interesting blend of mysticism. There's some really interesting model shots and optical effects work, which is amazing to see for an early talkie. But it's blended in with an adventure serial type feel, because it is based on an adventure serial type character, and it's full of pulpy fun goodness, and Lugosi is a perfect over the top maniacal villain with a great doomsday device and plot, and it's just a lot of fun. It's very brief at just 71 minutes, but it's an incredible little film that it's a must for Lugosi fans. If you've never seen this and you're a Lugosi fan, this is just going to be catnip for you. Lugosi really dominates every scene that he's in because it's an early talkie, and some of the other performances and the actual story itself is very typical of adventure stories of this time period. And in some ways, it kind of plays like one of the feature versions of a serial where they would cut a 12-chapter serial into a 70 or 90-minute feature film, and it would sort of feel jagged because it's just like pieces of serial chapters. But that's just my own opinion. But I think this is just a blast, and visually, it's a complete knockout, especially some of the tracking model shots and the optical effects work. It does carry over the extras from the DVD, so you get the wonderful Fox featurette, and best of all, it includes the Greg Mank commentary. And if you've never heard one of his commentaries, he is one of the great classic horror historians and one of the great film commentators. So every track that he ever does is just another of, it's an all-time great commentary. So he's one of the names that if you see it, you know the quality experience you're in for. So this is just basically an HD upgrade of the old Fox DVD from their wonderful Horror Volume 2 box set. This next one is truly important as one of the key early 3-strip Technicolor films, and also because it's from the Selznick studio, it's unfortunately in the out-of-print section and will most likely very quickly be sold out and removed from the website. And as Selznick titles are under Disney, and this film still is... it looks great on this release, but it still could use a complete 4K restoration, and it deserves one. It's unlikely that there's going to be another video release of this anytime soon. So I highly encourage you pick up 1936's The Garden of Allah, which is really... You can look at all the early 3-strip Technicolor films, but Becky Sharp being the first one in 1935, it sort of has to still, because it's the first one, it does have some rough edges in the photography, but a lot of those get worked out by the time you get to this film, which has the full Selznick stamp of quality all over it, and it is one of the most beautiful Technicolor films ever made. Here in this transfer, it doesn't really credit what it is, but it appears to be a sort of preservation or earlier attempt at restoration. I have seen the film once before, but it was not a very good looking version, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing it this way. Really love the original poster art, but this sort of set the stage for what Selznick would produce the next year, 1937, which is the original version of A Star is Born, which really further elevated three-strip Technicolor, and in a nice touch, there's some self-advertising, because when Janet Gaynor goes to the Chinese theater, famously, if you look, the poster of the film that's playing is The Garden of Allah, so, Selznick self-promoting himself. Unfortunately, this does not have any extras. It would have been great to have at least gotten a featurette or a commentary to at least talk about this film's importance for its Technicolor photography, but, unfortunately, that has not occurred. It's also got a really great Max Steiner score. It doesn't have any extras, but it does have one of Kino's old booklets hyping some of their other releases. Again, this is in the going out of print section. It is very cheap, and it promises to be better than any other version that I've ever seen of this. So I highly encourage you to get a copy of this before it's gone. The same fate happened to Becky Sharp. It was the best version that's ever been released on disc, and then it went in the out of print section. So because this is Selznick and thus Disney, I do highly encourage everybody to get a copy of this before it's gone. And then lastly, from 1990, I was surprised this was included because it's a more modern film and it's a new scan. And I just rewatched this for the first time in ages, so I was curious about this because there's also a director's commentary exclusive for this release. So I grabbed the release of Bird on a Wire, which was directed by John Badham, and it's a sort of interesting blend of trying to be a Hitchcockian on-the-run thriller with the couple sort of at odds, also with a screwball comedy. So in ways, it's sort of like if you mash together Hitchcock's Saboteur, which is truly underrated, and It Happened One Night. It's that sort of vibe. And to be quite honest, a lot of films after this point have tried to do this and really failed because they don't really get the humanity of the lead characters, and that's the best part of this. It does have a nice sort of reality to it, and because it was 1990 and they shot it on film, there's no CGI effects, there's no green screen or anything, and there are some rather nice practical stunts and little small action sequences. It's a more solid film than you would think, and I did enjoy revisiting it, which I actually had done on the old Laserdisc copy, because this is one of the discs you find kicking around for very cheap, and I picked it up on a whim because I remembered there was some good stuff in here, and John Badham is underrated, and I wanted to revisit it, and then Kino's sale popped up and the new disc was included. As I said, this is a new scan. It's credited as a new 2K HD master, and I had seen the reviews and knew this was a big leap forward over Universal's old crummy HD master, and they don't often do that on films of this era, so that's a nice thing. So you can get this for the picture quality alone, but it also includes a brand new commentary with director John Badham and the producer and second unit director Rob Cohen, who went on to many other things, and then Daniel Krimmer as well. So it's a sort of roundtable conversational talk, but I've heard good stuff about the commentary and that they're very candid, which is always the best stuff. So you get all kinds of juicy production stories and how the film played with the studio and things like that. So that's why I picked this up, because it's not gone on sale before, I don't think. It's a more modern Kino release, and it's a 90s film with a brand new HD master. So that always speaks well for 90s films that were, of course, all film. And then I couldn't resist, being on my recent Carole Lombard kick, I went for the beautiful box sets they've done. So this is Carole Lombard Collection Volume 1, with this gorgeous photo, very much in keeping with these sort of Kino versions of the old Warner Brothers signature collections. This includes 3 titles with beautiful original art. So we have the 1930 pre-code film Fast and Loose. It does include some trailers, but unfortunately, not all of these titles have extras in them, but the other two films do. They have brand new audio commentaries. So we have 1931's Man of the World. This, of course, pairs Carole Lombard with her husband, William Powell, and because they were married for a time. And it's fascinating seeing them on screen in a film earlier, much earlier than the classic My Man Godfrey, 5 years later. This has a commentary by Sam Deacon, who always does really nice commentaries, and it's a great way to see this, which has not gotten a lot of video releases, even though it is a Universal master. I assume these are similar to or the same as what turned up in their DVD set of Lombard titles. And then, most importantly, you have the 1932 No Man of Her Own with Clark Gable. This is where the two met, and of course, famously, they would later marry at the end of the decade. This is actually based on the Val Lewton novel No Bed of Her Own, but very loosely, they pretty much threw Lewton's novel out because it's an extremely emotional and very dark story of a woman trying to and her struggle to survive in harsh economic times. It's still a book I really want to read, but unfortunately it's long out of print. This basically takes the title and changes it, and sort of the premise and changes it entirely, but it's a wonderful film, and it's got great energy, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting it, but don't go into this thinking it's the actual Lewton novel, which is a great novel that I'm still dying to read. This has a new commentary by Nick Pinkerton, plus a trailer gallery, and again, just like the others, beautiful original poster art. So all three are packaged in the beautiful slip box. They are standalone releases, and Kino was doing this for some time. They have said that they're probably going to stop doing these specific box sets for stars, but they are really nice actual slip boxes for them. It's actually quite impressive, and again, it makes me think of the old Warner Brothers Signature Collection DVD sets. They do have other Lombard titles available that aren't in these sets, so again, it's sort of a hit and miss type packaging. If it is a particular star you're a great fan of and you want to get all of the Kino releases of that particular star, sometimes they have these wonderful box sets, and then sometimes there are other titles that are not collected in box sets. But this one, the Volume 1, focuses on 3 pre-code titles, whereas Volume 2 is all of 1935 and 1936 titles, 2 of them pairing Lombard with Fred MacMurray, who made for a popular on-screen couple for that time period. This is in the same matching style. It's again 3 titles in a beautiful little slip box. The first is 1935's Hands Across the Table, which again created this pairing between Lombard and Fred MacMurray, which was extremely popular. This was directed by Mitchell Leeson, and it's actually got a new audio commentary. All 3 of these do, so they are technically not necessarily special editions, but for Kino, getting a commentary is a nice touch, because not all Kino releases have commentaries. And in contrast to Volume 1, all 3 discs in the set have new audio commentaries, in addition to having a trailer gallery. We also have 1936's Love Before Breakfast, with this really striking poster artwork, and again, with a new audio commentary and trailer gallery. Now, all of the releases so far in these seem to be Universal Masters because they're licensed from Universal, but this one actually says that it's a brand new 2K Master, so I guess that means this one has the spiffed up video presentation. And that is 1936's The Princess Comes Across, again pairing Lombard with MacMurray, and with rather striking art, as all of these do have, and again with a new audio commentary and another trailer gallery. So even though these are really just slip boxes containing individual releases, they do look quite nice, especially their spines match and they look nice on the shelf. And again, I can't help but think of and be reminded of the old Warner Brothers Signature collections from the DVD era. So these are a nice package from Kino Lorber, and you get 3 titles for a great discount, particularly when they are in the sales Kino is always running. So again, it seems they're probably going to stop doing these box set packages, which is kind of a shame because they are quite nice, and I wish I'd gotten into these sooner. but also they were already releasing titles not included in box set volumes. So it's sort of, you still have to kind of mix and match if you want all the titles Kino has released of a particular star's filmography. So here's a shot of the spines so you can see those. So that's what I picked up in the Kino sale this time around. As usual, it's a mixture of new titles, titles I've wanted to get for a long time, and titles in their long-running going out of print sale. So it's always a good idea to jump on those titles before they disappear for good. I'd love to hear what you may have picked up in the sale, or if any of these perhaps tickle your fancy. As usual, I'm just kind of all over the place in terms of trying to chip away at things that I've wanted to get and things that are in the going out of print section, and of course the new releases that get included in the various sales. And just as with every Kino sale, you never know what exactly is going to be included. This one was actually quite a large selection, so I did try and think very clearly before just ordering everything because they release so many titles. You want to just be make very rash decisions and throw caution along with your wallet to the wind. But I limited myself on at least these titles. I splurged a little bit, and I have to once again thank their customer service department for such a speedy and easy turnaround process for getting those replacement copies on the two titles that were damaged. So again, that was a very pain-free process, which is not. You usually have to do a little bit more work, and there's a little bit more time in terms of getting a turnaround and getting a response. So it's definitely refreshing to get a response almost immediately and then get replacement copies within the next day or two, and just drop my damaged ones in the mail once I box them up with the return mailing slip that they sent me. So again, many thanks to their customer service department. So don't hesitate to contact them if you have any issues. They are extraordinarily helpful, and again, very, very quick in their response time, which again, not everybody is. So that was a nice and very pleasant surprise. As always, I hope this has been at least somewhat fun and hopefully informative. Maybe this will encourage you to pick up some of these titles from Kino, or the next time one of their sales rolls around, if you're interested in any of these and you're looking for titles to hit that wonderful magical $50 free shipping threshold that we all aspire to, which is like the magical number, because it's very easy to get to that point and then get free shipping directly from their website. So as I always do, I want to say, keep supporting your boutique labels and studio labels. Keep spinning your disc, keep physical media alive, and thanks ever so much for watching.